You know what the most radical thing a pop star can do right now? Be, like, genuinely, entirely unready. It just hits you right in the chest the second you hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when you listen to Olivia Dean's 2023 album, right on the title track when she sings, "You don't need to be ready, it's okay if it's messy," it isn't just a lyric. It is this radical, beautiful rejection of the algorithm-driven perfectionism that our entire generation is practically choking on.
Well, I mean,
Let me just get captures that chaotic, completely nonlinear reality of being in your 20s so perfectly, because she isn't hiding behind an aesthetic. She's not curating a vibe. It's just raw, unfiltered human experience, and it's like spilling over the edges.
okay, I have to stop you right there because that raw, unstructured messiness that you are feeling, it is a brilliantly executed auditory illusion.
An illusion?
Yes.
That completely undermines the entire emotional core of the record.
No, absolutely not. It's actually the highest compliment I can give as a producer. Look, speaking purely from a production and engineering standpoint, this album is the sonic equivalent of the no makeup look.
The what?
You know exactly what I'm talking about, where it takes 2 hours, a professional makeup artist, and like 15 different high-end products to look like you just miraculously rolled out of bed looking flawless.
Oh, right, sure.
Messy is one of the most meticulously engineered, tightly controlled studio albums of the entire decade. It takes a veteran producer like Matt Hales, who we know as Aqualung, right? Along with elite mixing engineers and an entirely live, perfectly synced rhythm section to sound this effortlessly messy.
What you're calling a raw emotional accident is actually deliberate high-end studio architecture.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. The magic of this album isn't in the studio architecture, it's in the psychological architecture.
Okay, explain that.
If we look at the context, Dean was coming off the immense pressure of her 2021 EP, Growth. The industry, the fans, everyone was expecting her debut full-length album to be this definitive statement of arrival.
Right, the big pop debut.
Exactly. They wanted a presentation of a fully healed, fully actualized pop star who had everything figured out. And instead, she actively chose vulnerability over polish. She leaned completely into disenfranchised grief, the sheer terror of outgrowing relationships, and the incredibly difficult, messy process of learning to let yourself be loved.
Sure, the themes are there.
She wrote a lot of this outside of London, too, retreating to places like Bath and Copenhagen, just trying to process real, lived upheaval. The album works precisely because she didn't want to present a finished version of herself. It's like an exposed brick building where you can see the mortar and the structural quirks. The flaws are the foundation.
I come at it from a different way. Because what you are interpreting as organic psychological vulnerability is actually a masterclass in vocal production and analog warmth.
You really think it's just a production trick?
Listen to the landscape of pop music in the early 2020s. We were absolutely drowning in sterilized, algorithm-optimized 30-second TikTok pop. Everything was synthesized, quantized to a grid, perfectly in tin.
Yeah, it was pretty bleak.
Right. So Dean and her team didn't just stumble into this supposedly raw sound by retreating to a cabin in Bath. They explicitly engineered a rebellion against that sterilized landscape. They utilized actual electromechanical elements.
Like what?
Organs, with real spinning speakers inside them that physically push air around the room. That gives you that analog warmth you can literally feel vibrating in your chest. They brought in top-tier live session musicians, guys like Hugh Foster on bass and Dan C. on the drums.
Which sounds incredible. I agree.
But they did it to create a deeply human groove with micro-timing variations that a programmed drum machine simply cannot replicate. They built a retro soul vehicle specifically designed to manipulate the listener into feeling that exact sense of intimacy you're talking about.
But you can't build intimacy without a foundation of truth. That intimacy is real. You bring up the human groove, so let's look at how that actually supports the storytelling, specifically on a track like The Hardest Part.
Okay, let's talk about the hardest part.
For me, that track is the absolute anatomy of a modern breakup, perfectly articulated. It's not a song about malice or betrayal or some cinematic screaming match in the rain. It's about the devastating, quiet reality of just outgrowing someone.
Mm-hmm.
The lyric where she realizes her worldview is evolving and the person she loves just can't come with her. It addresses a very specific, disenfranchised grief. You aren't supposed to mourn a breakup when nothing wrong happened, but she validates that pain.
It's a powerful narrative. I won't deny that.
It became a literal therapeutic tool for an entire fan base navigating the nonlinear process of healing, which, by the way, organically led to that incredible collaboration with Leon Bridges later on. You don't get that level of profound audience connection without genuine, bleeding heart honesty.
I absolutely acknowledge the immense emotional weight of the song, but let me explain mechanistically why it hits you so hard sonically. It is not just the lyrics doing the work. It's the stark, laid-back production by Bastian Langsbeck. Have you really listened to the mix on that track?
I mean, I listened to the feeling of it.
Listen to the engineering. There is this incredibly minimalist snare drum and a thick foundational bass line that just anchors you. But more importantly, let's talk about the vocal production. Cameron Gower-Poole, the vocal producer, deliberately mixed her vocals incredibly dry.
Meaning without the standard industry effects covering her up.
Exactly. No heavy reverb, no echo, no delay to hide behind. In standard pop production, reverb creates an acoustic space. It makes a singer sound larger than life, like they are singing in a stadium or a cathedral.
Right, giving it that big pop sound.
Right. By stripping all of that away, Gower-Poole is playing with the psychoacoustics of closeness. She explicitly cited the sparse production of Mac Miller's final album and Lauryn Hill's work as influences.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. By placing her vocal so far up front in the mix, with zero spatial effects, the vocal sits right up against the listener's eardrum. It artificially amplifies the vulnerability because your brain interprets that lack of acoustic space as physical proximity.
That makes sense.
She was left totally exposed on the microphone. So yes, the lyrics are sad, but it's the mix that tricks your brain into feeling like she's sitting on the edge of your bed crying. The engineering is doing the heavy lifting.
Wait, but exposing her vocals like that is incredibly risky. That's not an engineering trick. That's bravery.
How so?
If you mix a vocal that dry, right against the eardrum, the singer has absolutely nowhere to hide. If she misses a pitch by a fraction of a semitone, if her breath shakes, every single listener hears it. You are describing a high-wire act without a net and calling it manipulation.
Well,
No, think about it. The fact that she allowed the engineers to mix it that dry proves my point. Her vulnerability is genuine.
it's a calculated risk, certainly, but it is a calculated choice made in a studio environment.
But those studio choices only matter because they mirror the emotional narrative of the record. The isolation of that dry vocal mix is the exact same isolation she writes about thematically. Take the transition at the very beginning of the album between UFO and Dive.
Okay.
This is purely narrative brilliance. UFO sets up this incredible metaphor of a shy alien surveying the Earth, looking for a safe place to land. It's hesitant, it's alienated, it's a person looking at the terrifying prospect of opening up to someone.
Right, the setup.
And then it seamlessly gives way to Dive, which represents the euphoric, terrifying, physical rush of finally falling in love. It's the story of a girl dropping her guard, moving from profound isolation into overwhelming connection.
Let's strip away the romantic metaphors for a second and look at how that atmosphere is actually achieved technically.
You can't strip them away, they're the whole point.
But just listen to the mechanics. UFO feels alienated and anxious not just because she's singing about an alien, but because the production enforces it. The track has an abruptly short runtime of exactly 2 minutes and 34 seconds.
Which leaves you hanging.
Exactly. It leaves the listener feeling unresolved. Furthermore, it relies heavily on a vocoder. Do you know why a vocoder makes you feel anxious?
Because it sounds unnatural?
It mathematically strips the natural human imperfections, the vibrato, the breath, the micro-pitch fluctuations from the vocal cord, and locks it into a robotic synthesized grid. It literally removes her humanity. That's an auditory trick to simulate isolation.
Okay.
And then contrast that with Dive. You call it a euphoric physical rush? Do you know how you mathematically simulate adrenaline in a studio?
By, I don't know, writing a soaring melody that naturally excites the listener?
By manipulating tempo mapping and frequency saturation. They push the BPM, the beats per minute, just slightly ahead of the listener's resting heart rate. Then, they bring in Motown-inspired backing vocals in a punchy, aggressive live brass section.
It is a great brass section.
Phenomenal. You have Kaidi Akinabi blowing the doors off on the saxophone and Elias Jordan Atkinson on the trumpet. Brass instruments operate in the mid to high frequency range, which human ears are evolutionarily designed to be highly sensitive to. It's the same frequency range as a baby crying or an alarm.
Wait, really?
Yes, they are physically pushing the air in the room to increase your heart rate. The tempo shifts, the brass swells, and your nervous system is tricked into a state of fight or flight excitement. It's an engineered dopamine hit. You're giving the lyrics credit for a physical reaction that the horn section is actively demanding of your physiology.
But that adrenaline rush you're talking about in Dive doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a physical reaction to emotional anxiety, which is exactly what she explores later in the album.
So you're saying the lyrics guide the physiological response?
Exactly. The instrumentation wouldn't matter at all if the observational genius wasn't there to ground it. We have to talk about Ladies' Room. This is one of the most brilliant pieces of observational pop of the decade.
It is a standout track.
She takes the universal liminal sanctuary of a nightclub bathroom, the one place where women find solidarity and safety away from the male gaze, to process their anxieties, fix their makeup, or cry over a text message, and she turns it into a cultural thesis.
Right.
The genius was in the setting. It's the relatable reality of hiding in a bathroom stall when your internal world is falling apart, while the rest of the world continues to party outside.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that it's just about the lyrics. Let me tell you why.
Okay, go ahead.
The lyrical anxiety of Ladies' Room only works because of the jarring, deliberate juxtaposition with the music. Aston Rudy arranged this carefree, highly danceable disco-funk percussion track. If you take those exact same anxious lyrics about hiding in a bathroom stall and you put them over a slow, sad piano chord progression, it becomes a dirge.
Well, yeah, it would be a totally different song.
It's boring. It's melodramatic. The genius isn't the bathroom setting. It's the friction. It's the tension between the narrator having a complete internal psychological meltdown and the relentless carefree groove of the bass line, forcing the listener to dance anyway. It physically simulates the feeling of having to keep a smile on your face at a party while you're dying inside.
I will gladly grant you that the friction is brilliant. And it absolutely makes you want to dance through the panic. But you cannot divorce that music from the lived experience and heritage of the artist.
Okay, fair.
Which brings us to the absolute climax of the record, the track where the community and the isolation finally reconcile, Carmen. If you want to talk about raw reality, this isn't just a pop song. It is a historical document.
It really is.
It's a love letter to her grandmother and the entire Windrush generation. She's singing about an 18-year-old girl crossing the world to rebuild a post-war nation, transplanting a family tree so a part of it could grow into her. She is anchoring her entire messy 20s into this lineage of survival and grace.
Mm-hmm.
When she stood on that stage at the 2026 Grammys accepting Best New Artist and dedicated the win to Carmen in front of the entire industry that proved the global resonance of this deeply localized, highly personal narrative, she made her grandmother's story immortal.
We absolutely agree on the power of Carmen. It's a masterpiece of a closer. But again, I have to insist that the emotion you felt during that Grammy speech and the emotion you feel listening to the track is anchored by the technical integration of specific sonic textures. Namely, the steel pan.
Beautifully played by Russell Ramesh Roberts, which directly honors her Caribbean British heritage.
Yes, but it's how it's played and mixed that matters. What's crucial is that Matta Hales and the production team didn't use the steel pan as some cheap, generic tropical pop gimmick, layered haphazardly over a synthesized beat.
Right, it doesn't sound gimmicky at all.
Because it was mixed deliberately alongside DeShannel Gordon's lush, sprawling organs and that massive horn section we talked about earlier. Do you know how difficult it is to mix those frequencies without it sounding like mud?
I imagine it's pretty tough.
It's a nightmare. They purposefully filled the frequency spectrum to texturally recreate the chaotic warmth of a crowded Caribbean British family gathering. By panning the steel drum slightly off-center, letting the organ wash over the low mids, and keeping the live percussion dynamic, they physically built a three-dimensional acoustic space with sound waves.
Wow.
It literally sounds like a busy living room. That's why it resonates globally.
They engineered a space you can step into.
But that's exactly my point. The sound waves are entirely in service of the heritage. The engineering is bowing to the lived experience, which is exactly what makes a certain polarizing critique of this album so incredibly infuriating to me.
Oh, I think I know what you're going to say.
We have to talk about The Guardian's 6.0 out of 10 review. They criticized the album for relying on what they called tired neo-soul fodder and hackneyed British soul tropes, specifically pointing out the 60s rhythms and the artificial vinyl crackle. They basically called it a museum piece.
And honestly, from a critical, purely production-focused standpoint, I agree with them.
You actually agree with that review, that it's tired fodder?
I do. Look, as meticulously crafted as it is, the album does rely heavily on established architectures. It's not avant-garde. It is not reinventing the wheel sonically.
But it doesn't need to.
It leans very heavily on the sonic blueprints left by Sade, early Lauryn Hill, and the entire 90s acid jazz movement in the UK. The horn stabs, the Motown bass lines, the specific way the snare is tuned, they are established tropes. They are highly effective, beautifully executed tropes, but tropes nonetheless. The Guardian wasn't wrong to point out that from a structural standpoint, she played it relatively safe musically. She built a classic house. She didn't invent a new type of architecture.
I strongly reject that premise entirely. Criticizing Messi for sounding like classic soul completely misses the point of why the album exists.
How so?
The so-called tropes are entirely secondary to the fact that she is articulating genuine, messy, modern anxieties. It was never about inventing a new avant-garde genre of music. It was about the authenticity of the messenger. If it was just tired fodder, if it was just a safe recycling of Sade and Lauryn Hill, you wouldn't have seen that massive delayed explosion on the U.S. Billboard 200 charts 3 years after its release.
Well,
That chart movement wasn't driven by a trendy production gimmick. It was driven by millions of fans genuinely connecting with the woman who told them it was okay to not have their lives figured out.
Or, if we look at the data, it was driven by the fact that analog, meticulously crafted music inherently has a longer shelf life than synthesized, trend-chasing pop.
You think the chart success was just about the analog sound?
It took 3 years for the American market to catch up, because organic music recorded with real instruments in physical rooms, burns slower, but it burns longer. The ear doesn't fatigue as quickly when it's listening to real air being pushed by real musicians.
I'll agree it burns longer, but I maintain it burns longer because it feels like a late-night conversation with a friend who understands your grief, who understands your joy, and who honors your cultural heritage.
Yeah, I hear that.
Messi endures because Olivia Dean gave an entire generation of burnt-out, hyper-optimized 20-somethings permission to be imperfect. The album is a triumph of empathy.
And it endures because we must respect the astonishing technical craftsmanship required to make a modern album sound that seamlessly organic. It is a triumph of elite analog studio engineering pushing back in against a sterilized era of music, proving that human mechanics, when captured correctly, will always outlast the algorithm.
I think we can both acknowledge that whether you're listening for the tear-jerking lyrics about outgrowing a lover or you're listening for the flawless, dry mixing of a live vocal, Messi is an undeniably brilliant piece of modern British soul.
Absolutely. Put on a really good pair of studio headphones, close your eyes, and you get to experience both the feeling and the frequency simultaneously.
Exactly. Though, speaking of frequency, I'm still endlessly fascinated by the interlude I Could Be a Florist. It's just a minute and 20 seconds of this gorgeous acoustic daydreaming.
Well, structurally, Florist is essentially just a palette cleanser. If you look at Max Wolfgang's engineering on the piano there, it's incredibly stark, highly compressed. It's just meant to sonically reset your ears before the massive swell of the title track.
But it's so much more than a reset. Think about the lyrics. It's that universal fantasy of just dropping completely off the grid, leaving the pressure of your career, the anxiety of your relationships, and just arranging flowers in a quiet shop. It's pure escapism, a total rejection of the hustle.